Welcome to Node Mode. I am Depeche Node, and this is the NFT podcast on digital art. We talk with artists, OG collectors, and the smartest people in the space about all things NFTs. As usual, nothing in this video is financial advice. We are not financial advisors, and the NFT space is incredibly risky, so always do your own research. Don't forget to like this podcast, subscribe, share if you can. Let's spread the good digital gospel that is Node Mode. Shout out to the YouTube sponsor, So Rare. Think fantasy sports meets Web3 and digital collectibles. You can sign up at thenifty.com/SoRare. Today, we are joined by a man named Sam. Not the SBF Sam, thank goodness, but the man known as Punk 9059 or NFTStatistics.eth. He has risen to fame very quickly with some incredible Twitter threads, diving deep into data analysis on different NFT collections and categories. Now works full-time at Proof. NFT Statistics. Sam, welcome to the show, man. How you doing?
What's up, man? SBF did our name wrong.
Dude, he really he turned the most bland, like the most just like very normal happy name is like Sam, and now you are a villain, dude. Anything with the name of Sam, straight villain.
It's a pretty high crossover with dogs. I feel like a lot of dogs are named Sam. But yeah, no, I saw these tweets like never trust anyone named Sam. And I'm like, fair.
Yeah, it's a challenge, man. I mean, yeah, you really had all the goodwill of dogs in general, like all the preschool books, like, I am Sam, here I am. Like, that's perfect, dude. Apologies to you for the recent debacles. But dude, I want to jump right into it because you are one of the most unique people in the entire space because number one, you have a brain. And number two, you use it to do sophisticated data analysis. So like, okay, I got to know what you were doing before you jumped into Web3.
Sure. So I'm 41. I'm pretty old for this space, but this is my third career. My first career was at Goldman Sachs, and at Goldman Sachs I did investment research, and I lived in Asia actually. So went to school in California, worked in San Francisco for a couple of years, and then moved to Asia, Hong Kong, doing investment research. And I'd say a lot of what I do kind of picks up on stuff I learned there. 2000, that was still 2011. Then I joined Uber. I was one of the first 50 employees at Uber. And at Uber, I launched new countries. So I launched London, I launched the UK, I launched the Netherlands, I launched China, Singapore. And my job was not in data. I was kind of in operations, hiring, running like teams there. But I definitely spent a lot of time diving into our SQL database. Like that was like my passion, was just to like learn interesting data about Uber. And it's kind of like when you're working at a company like that, it really is a superpower, when you're the person who can kind of validate everything that people are saying and supposing. So yeah, that was my last job. Spent a little time in cryptos, did a couple things here and there, moved back to Colorado from Hong Kong. I lived there for 15 years and just got into NFTs. And a couple clients from Goldman Sachs who I thought were pretty good, like hedge fund macro guys, started buying CryptoPunks. And at first I thought it was silly, like really, really dumb. I have some like Twitter, like WhatsApp threads with friends or conversations where I was really negative on NFTs. And then just one day the FOMO hit and I wanted to buy one, and I couldn't find a floor price chart anywhere. So I started to build data myself and started a Twitter account a couple months later, and here we are.
Dude, that's amazing. So was a Punk your first purchase?
I think I got a Meebit first that I bought for like 9 ETH and sold for 3 ETH. Just like,
congrats.
Just like make sure I could do it. One of a long history of poor trading decisions on my part. But yeah, I bought a Punk. At first I bought a Punk that I thought got sniped, like where you buy one and then someone pays more gas and gets it. NFT or Punk's OTC recently told me, he looked at like the Etherscan. He said, hey, you actually didn't get sniped. Someone bought it like 1 second before you did. But yeah, a month later, I did buy a Punk, and it wasn't this Punk. It was actually Punk 9059, which is not the pink hair Punk. It's a male Punk with big shades, and that's my other Punk. So I have 2 Punks.
Oh, nice. I had always assumed it was the pink hair, but you've gone full pink hair for the branding, yeah?
I've gone full pink hair. I'm thinking about, I don't know if I should drop this. I'm thinking about changing my PFP at least for a day.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's gonna be crazy. But
do it, man. NFT God would be mad at you, but I think you'll be totally fine.
That's true.
You switch it for a day or two and you won't lose 1 million followers. You'll be totally fine.
I like NFT God. Like we've done a thread together and stuff, but there are a couple of things where I'm like, I roll a little bit different. Like he's really into this, like never change your PFP. And I was changing mine a fair amount. And then I somehow like one day I went from like 10,000 to 15,000 followers. Like something just like blew up. I don't remember what it was, but I had this PFP then and just stuck with it.
That's killer. Yeah, we've had NFT got on the show. He was awesome. One of our highest like listened to shows for sure. Okay, so I want to dive in like directly into the data that you talk about. So like from Goldman Sachs, I mean investment research, you have to go you spend like a lot of time on companies, right? Like I got a brother-in-law that's in the hedge fund world from Colorado. You guys must all just like living in Colorado, but like do you I mean the amount of time that you guys dig in to understand something, did you basically just say, okay, I'm going to treat collections like they're a business I need to research and just get as much information as possible? Like, what's your process there?
I think there's a bit of that. Like when I was at Goldman, I did options research. So I researched option prices, like vol prices, which was a little different from companies. But like, I mean, I think here it's more just trying to understand how do NFTs trade, you know? And the big thing that I started doing, and kind of one of my views, is that floor prices tell the, like, if you need one piece of data about a collection, it's the floor price. And because floor prices aren't on chain, you know, it's trades are on chain, but your listing price on OpenSea is not on chain. It's very hard for a lot of these like big data platforms. Like Nansen didn't even have floor data for a while. So I just started collecting floors, and I think over time I'd have like a year of floor data for a ton of different collections. And at that point I could start seeing what are the trends of how do NFTs trade? And a couple of like the cool kind of things I found were, one, the biggest indicator of what the floor is going to do today is what it did yesterday. So something like, CryptoPunks were double as likely to go up. The floor is double as likely to go up today if it went up yesterday. And like, they're just like momentum assets. And that's, if you look at like the S&P 500 or even like Bitcoin, there's almost no information value in what the market did yesterday. Like it's a 50-50 guess. Like that gives you nothing about what it's going to do today. Whereas in NFTs, the floor prices like are double as likely to go up or down based on what happened yesterday. The other thing I found was that over time, NFTs tend to trend lower, and then they just have big up days. So even like when Doodles went from, Doodles minted out, I think below 1 ETH. There was a time where they were at 11 ETH. So it was like basically they went up to 24 ETH at one point. But I did this analysis when they were at 11 ETH. It was an 11x in less than like 8 months, and still Doodles went down more days than they went up. It was just that when you just had to be there, because when they went up, you'd have these like FOMO pumps where things would go up 1 to 2 ETH, or, maybe not that much, but 20-30%. So I like found that like the way that NFTs behave over time is they naturally move down over time. Just like the steady state is that floor prices are going to move lower, but you have to be there when like the big pumps and the big catalysts happen. So I was just trying to like figure those types of things out. I was trying to like run analysis on, I built a doc that could say like, this is an index of NFTs. Like these are like 10 collections. Like how are they moving and how's the rest of the market moving? And I could find things that like the top 5 collections were up 100% and everything else was down 50%. And I'd start tweeting these charts and people would say, oh, like that's something I always felt and knew and had this feeling about, but like never have saw the chart. So a lot of what it was just telling people things I already knew, but putting a chart on it.
I love that. So just to reframe, because I think just the two things you just shared were super valuable. So number one, you found like in general, NFTs bleed over time, but then they'll have massive upruns in a short time frame, which makes total sense if you've ever watched any project rip at all. And then the first thing you mentioned, I'm already forgetting, but it was like
momentum.
Yeah. So the momentum piece, like what exactly are the parameters with the momentum that you look at to say like it's more likely than not to go up? Like you say, if it went up the day before, it's twice as likely to go up the next day. But how much does it need to go up, or do you even look at that?
This was literally just like a binary flag. Like, did the floor go up yesterday? If it went up yesterday, that's like, and certainly if it went down yesterday, something like punks are like, it's something like 70% of the time, if the floor went down yesterday, it's going to go down again today.
That's insane.
Wow.
Yeah. This was even across like things like Bored Apes. Bored Apes were always, especially when I was like in the heart of doing this kind of analysis, like Bored Apes are up like 1,000x. They minted at 0.08 ETH, and I was like doing analysis when they were at 80 ETH. But you'd even see things like this that even Bored Apes, had close to as many down days as up days, even though they're up 1,000x. Like it was. I don't remember the exact numbers on it, but it was pretty categorical across NFTs, and it kind of makes sense. It's like the natural state is like people are, when you're selling, you kind of lower it a little bit, and then when like people see other people are buying, then they start tackling on and on. But so you get those like bigger rips on the upside, but like you just get those slow bleeds lower.
Yeah. So you're tracking, right now, I guess you probably do it for two reasons now. Like number one, you're the director of research at Proof. But number two, I imagine you're pulling the data because you're interested in it. What data do you feel like you look at on a daily basis, just in terms of, hey, this is my morning routine, how I look at the market?
Yeah, I mean that's changed a lot since I got to Proof, because at Proof I publish like a 2-page newsletter every single day with tons of data. And it takes me like 4 hours. I get up at like 6 in the morning. Then maybe 2 hours if I'm cranking. The problem is I get distracted on Twitter, and then I like Rug Radio comes on and I'll go talk there, and then next thing I'm like, fuck, I got to get this thing out. But yeah, so the things I do, one is I have some docs myself where I just update floor prices every day. It's just a script that pulls from OpenSea. And even though OpenSea floors aren't like totally representative of the market, I found them representative enough, and you get all these variables around frozen assets with other exchanges. So I've just kind of stuck to that. Yeah, so I have my doc, and then it immediately tells me which like 20 collections had the biggest floor rise and the biggest floor drop every day. So that's like my first thing where I'm like, okay, now I know what over the past 24 hours, what's been moving, what's not. And then I'll try to figure out like from there, okay, like what caused it. The other things I'll do is NFT Go has a page that looks at the top 100 sales. So one of the sections in my newsletter is like, what are 3 sales that mattered yesterday? And I'll find 3 interesting sales. Today I did like a Clone X for 96 ETH. The top Valhalla traded for 25 ETH was interesting. One of those Dmitry Cherniak pieces traded for 27 ETH, which is interesting because that's the first time that actually one of the post-selection pieces has traded. So all those trades all have some narrative there. And then I'll always go through Super Rare and just see what was the top sale on Super Rare. I'll put that in there. I have a macro doc where I just like look at like, okay, what was market share across exchanges? What was the ETH volume today? Post that every single day. Look at like just basic, what were the top volume charts? I have an index of large caps that I check. And then the next thing I do is I pull out 4 headlines that were interesting. So the place I go for that are, I mean, the single best place for NFT news stories, saying it here, Lucky Trader HQ. Those guys are just freaking awesome. I mean, they're great, but I mean, you have NFT Now, NFT Evening, NFT Gators. You have a lot of different NFT sites that I'll go for news stories. The thing I like about Lucky Trader is they're out there being like, Killabears dropped some random drop, like Cyber Broker is doing this for the community next Monday. Like they're catching all the random stuff that like, unless you're just mad degen, you're not noticing. So I really like Lucky Trader. I look at CoinDesk. Sometimes I just Google NFT. If you just Google NFT, you'll see interesting stuff that people aren't talking about. So I don't know. That's a long-winded answer because kind of hit the heart of what I spend my time doing. But
no, it's a great answer, and mad props to you. I mean, I tried to do like a daily update on Twitter for like several months in 2021 of what's happening in the NFT space. And I like was not spending time with my family. Like, dude, it was bad because it eats up your day trying to be like, okay, how do I get all this information and try and spit it out in a relevant fashion? I remember it was like me and Mando were doing like daily tweets of like, hey, this is what happened in NFTs today. And I just flat out burned out because it is
brutal,
a lot.
It's like, I have 3 kids too, and I drive them to school. So that's kind of like where I'll chop up my morning. Yeah. But yeah, man, I mean, to me, it was really brutal. Like in Miami, I'm going out with the team, stuff like that, and then got to come home. And but for me, it's like, I have this commitment to the Proof Collective that I'm going to crank this out every single day. And the minute I stop doing that and no one notices or something, the whole thing's going to fall to shreds. And to be honest, this has actually been my mojo since the very beginning of my Twitter account. Every day I would post what did CryptoPunks do? Like what did the CryptoPunk floor do? And if you go way, way back, this is my first tweets. I had 100 followers. And I'd say like 3D Glasses floor was up. We did 7 sales. That's high relative to the past month. Like I would just do stuff like that. So I know I can do daily stuff about NFTs, but the routine's getting long with this newsletter and a little video stuff.
Yeah, it's good that you've got a full-time gig, right? That helps that's your job for sure. Now, you mentioned marketplaces. I'm really curious on your thoughts on the marketplaces because there's obviously a lot happening now between we have, just a million are popping up. The latest is Blur. How are you viewing marketplaces in general? Like what do you think is going to happen with OpenSea's market share versus Blur versus X2Y2? Yeah, give me your thoughts there because I feel like that's a very dynamic component in the market right now.
Yeah, I mean, and that's an area I talk a lot about, and I've like I said yesterday, I tweeted some stuff that I don't like to be controversial, but yesterday I tweeted some stuff that was read as controversial. So maybe I drink too much coffee, and sometimes that happens. But look, I think that you've had this trend towards zero royalty, and it started with Pseudo, and then Gem pulled in Pseudo, and X2Y2 said, well, if a company by OpenSea is pulling in Pseudo, then we're going zero royalty. And you just kind of had this slippery slope down towards a zero royalty paradigm. And I think we're seeing in the marketplace that optional royalties, or Blur likes to say incentivized royalties, that in reality, like in those dynamics, it just ends up being, I'm not going to say zero royalty, but like 90% of Doodles trades on Blur, 90% of Azuki trades on Blur are 0% royalty. That's zero. I'm not, and the 10 that pay probably don't pay full. But so we're just seeing that dynamic. I think it's unfortunate because it just it becomes very hard to compete if you have to charge 5% more because of a third party that you're honoring who doesn't have any say in the matter at all. And so I think what we saw was that Art Gobblers was really kind of the turning point. You had kind of OpenSea at like 70 to 75% share. Before this all happened, they were like 85, 90% share. But it got down and then kind of was like at like 70, 75% share. But then when Art Gobblers came, all that volume was on Blur, and OpenSea basically went down to 40% for a day. And they essentially said, like, we can't be in this environment where we're charging royalties, everyone else isn't, because we end up with 20% market share. It just doesn't work. And obviously they've kind of had a couple measures where they've basically said, now we're not with new projects. If you want to be on OpenSea, have any royalties enforced, you have to block all these other projects, that all these other marketplaces that don't enforce royalties. And that was a response to Art Gobblers, because with Art Gobblers, they had 20% market share, because there was nothing they could do, because if they're enforcing royalties and other people aren't, then everyone's going to trade elsewhere. So I said, going forward, we're gonna have to, I mean, you all saw what happened, and their market share has kind of steadied off at like 55, 60%, which is where we are now. So I don't know. It's certainly an interesting dynamic. There are a lot of moving pieces, a lot of very heated opinions, and I have some of those too. So I don't know. That's a bit of a ramble, but
yeah, no, I mean, so just in general, like, what do you think in terms of OpenSea, aside from the royalty whole debate, like just pure market share? Do you feel like there's the companies like Blur? Do you think Blur is here to stay? I guess is a good starting point.
I definitely think that Blur has a unique, like, I think what they did different, X2Y2 and Looks Rare came on and had just very, very similar product offerings, very, very similar UI. And Blur came out and said, we're going to look totally different. We're going to do something totally different. We're going to be faster. We're going to aggregate other marketplaces. So, it used to be that if you wanted to see where everything was, like, you could use Gem, but broadly, like what I did was I had a bunch of different tabs open, and Blur brought everybody in, and then they kind of slid themselves in underneath. So I think that they've been innovative on the UI side, and I think they brought unique. I mean, their tech feels unique in the sense that it does feel faster. So I think there is a bit of there, but when you're charging 0% royalties and 0%, 0% fees is good on them. Like, that's a transfer from their shareholders to us as traders, and that's all good. But when you're cutting out a third party that someone else isn't cutting out, like, it's hard to separate that from other reasons they might be doing well. It would be really cool to see if they weren't doing that, how they'd be doing relative to OpenSea, because I do think they have a unique offering.
Yeah.
But when you're out there, like, literally charging 7% less, I think it's very hard to measure apples to apples in terms of anything else.
For sure, for sure. Before I go any further, Pio, I imagine you've got a few questions for this guy. I'll let you take it away for a sec before I jump in. I've got a lot of questions on art, of course, but I know Pio's got some questions. We love the data, so go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm just going to want to invite Sam, to come on the main podcast on this network too, because I feel like we could talk to him for hours. So hopefully maybe in January he's down to do that, but Sam, I'm looking at your collection that you have here, and you have like the kind of who's who of major profile picture collections right here. Obviously Node's going to dive into the art side. I feel that the art side, once you just kind of grasp digital ownership and you grasp the idea that digitally native art will realistically at some point in the future, if you just kind of extrapolate, it'll be regarded in the same way as traditional art. I think that you can appreciate value accrual. The thing that I have a tougher time with, right? And so this isn't to call out any individual collections. I'm just going off of the collections that you have listed right here. I look at CryptoPunks, Bored Ape Yacht Club. I can understand why value would accrue there. CryptoPunks basically falls into like the grail collectible and art category. Bored Ape Yacht Club has enough capital and relevance at this point that perhaps they just end up in the kind of grail collectible category as well long term. That's totally understandable. I look at, you got Crypto Moris right here. Obviously, Azuki has shown, very, very robust strength. You got Dora Darcells right here, Doodles, all these different collections. World of Women. What makes one of these collections during a time like this, when the space is getting smaller, not bigger, what causes a World of Women galaxy right now to accrue value? What causes a Crypto Mori to accrue value? Is it singularly dependent on the actions of the founders day to day? And if so, what are those actions? Like what can the Crypto Mori's team do to make Crypto Mori price go up? I'm just trying to understand this on the sort of profile picture side of the space.
Yeah, I mean, those are the golden questions and kind of what I spend my life thinking about. I should say about this banner, my approach to NFTs, especially when I got more into data and kind of like seeing myself as a source of just kind of trying to be a source of honesty, I guess, in the space, was I decided to kind of stop trading. And my approach was like, let's just get one of everything. And, I was trading a lot earlier. And I was like, let's just get one and not worry as much about it, kind of vaulted a little bit. And, a lot of these guys have not done very well. And I'm not going to sit here and say like that they're going to pump soon. But I think one example I think is doing well is obviously Azuki, and if you look at Azuki, I don't know what the floor is today, but they hit 13 yesterday. And that was a post Zagabond FUD high. So I think like what happened there was like all this. There's a lot of people who find Zagabond deplorable, and I won't even weigh in with thoughts on that. But some people find him awful. Those people are gone. And the people who are still around, like the one thing I learned at NFT NYC was that I went to the Azuki event, and actually Zaga personally reached out to me. And, I was just a Twitter account who tweeted its stats. He's like, dude, I love your account. Would love for you to come to this event. And I had an Azuki, so I was like, sure, I'll go. What I learned is that this is like a huge kind of like identity marker, and I don't know if status symbol, but like identity marker within the Asian American community. And then I see like these pictures in like Taiwan, they have like 100 people meetups, and I think like whatever it is that sort of Bored Apes did, I feel like Azuki is doing within communities right now. There are people who are like, this is my grail, this is my identity marker, this is what I want to be a part of. And I think that that's just driving a lot of this. I mean, spirits, I tweeted today, there have been 6 spirit sales above 100 ETH since November 1st. That's more than any other project in the world other than Art Blocks, Bored Apes, and CryptoPunks. So there's something happening here. You had Adrian Chang, who I worked in Hong Kong. I lived in Hong Kong for 15 years. He's like a Hong Kong billionaire, owns more money than I can kind of think about having. Like he swept 100. That's just a whole new audience. So yeah, I think with this project, like I think they're doing a couple things well. They're building stuff like that just keeps anticipation going. I think in all these projects, you want people to have something to be excited about, like something to look forward to. And I think with Azuki, you always kind of feel like something's brewing. They don't talk much, but when they talk, all these meetups I see in Taiwan, it's like, it's always just community run. But when they talk, they deliver kind of pretty interesting products. You have people in the community who could be expanding it to other people who buy NFTs, so I think that's like an interesting one to watch. I only own one Azuki. I'm not like pumping my bag hard here. I have 2 clones, 2 doodles, 2 moonbirds, 2 punks. So, I don't have like a big Azuki bag, but I think that they're doing a lot of those right things. And I think it really is like, can you build anticipation? Can you make people feel like they're part of something interesting, and almost as importantly, part of something that's growing? And I think a lot of these collections, that's what they haven't been able to do. Like people feel like, I like this. I like the community. I kind of resonate with the art, but it just doesn't feel like it's growing. It doesn't feel like it's expanding in any way. And then just like those good vibes start to fade away and become a lot harder to recapture. So I don't know. I think you see little signs of it happening in certain places. I'm seeing it right now in like Killer Bears. There's something going on there. I got to figure it out. Corkies are having a moment again. I've owned Corkies forever. There are only 5,000 of them, and you just have a few whales that are so aggressive in that project and promoting it and bringing on new people. Who knows how long that can last. But I think to your point, it's like, are you building something that ultimately can have an off ramp? That's like the interesting thing, that like doesn't require your team to pump out new tech. it takes a long time to get there. But I think that's really the goal. Like, I kind of like Doodles. I feel like with Doodles, like they're out there, they're out there. They at least have a strategy. It feels like they at least like their view is like, let's make this a global brand. Let's hire people from like the production, from the Hollywood, from that world, make this something that more people have their eyes on. So they come to this project. Like, at least that's a strategy, and we'll see how it plays out. I like Moonbirds, but I generally don't talk about Moonbirds because I work there and I got, I see what's going on, and I just don't like to push that in either direction as someone who runs research for that and like research of other projects. But I don't know, just telling the birds out there. I'm not trying to like ignore birds. That's just kind of like the way I've approached kind of like how I talk in public. But again, I can ramble about this stuff. Those are just some thoughts there.
Yeah. And I'm not even trying to get you to talk about individual collections. Like, this is why, quirkies will go up, blah, blah, blah. And I know that you look at all the data to try to point to that. Like, for me, I'm just such like a deep believer in the tech. I come from Bitcoin. That's how I got here. And now I'm becoming more and more of a believer in Ethereum. And then obviously I'm a believer in NFTs in terms of the technology. But the thing that's becoming more challenging for me to think about is the fact that each of these NFT things are basically startups, right? And you can make a case of once they cross over to Grail collectibles or art, totally different conversation, right? Doesn't matter that Larva Labs is out of the picture. CryptoPunks are CryptoPunks. That's it. I can see them in a museum. I can see billionaires saying, I need a CryptoPunk. I totally get that. That's an easy play for value accrual. It's basically just an identical playbook to traditional art world value accrual, Picasso, Matisse, whoever, however, it's digital instead of physical. But my thing is like, if they can, is the end goal for all this stuff to just cross over to Grail collectible? Because otherwise, or is it to build an actual functioning business that happens to have a digital asset in the ecosystem? Like, is Doodles goal would you say, like, using Doodles as an example, or use whatever you want as an example, doesn't matter. Is the goal to cross over to a Grail collectible? Is the goal to start a business, or both? Because otherwise, in 4 years, in 6 years, I can't tell if the goal is just more and more venture capital. The goal ain't royalties. That's not running your business. That's for sure. Or at least the way it stands now, it's not a thing. So that's like the part of it that's getting more challenging for me to understand.
Yeah, I mean, the other guys, one of the things that 6529 says, Punk 6529, who's obviously a thought leader in the space, and he always says this is the first time in crypto that he's been that people aren't talking about the tech. Like, people are saying, I love rainbow puke doodles. Why? Because there's rainbow puke coming out of his mouth. Like, tech is
collectible factor.
Collectible tech isn't even part of the conversation. And just everything I've seen, what's doing well, it's brands people resonate. So I think you're building a brand. Like, I think that's what you're doing. You're building a brand, and hopefully you can sell more of that product over time. And maybe it's through royalties, maybe it's through other primary sales that like you can expand the brand, just like Prada or a watch company does. They put more out, but ultimately what I've seen do well is brands that people feel connection to. And it's like, and apes do that apes have done that through a lot of different things. First it was through airdrops that gave people money and that gave people access to this brand. Then it was, it's different events they throw. Then who knows what's going on with other deed or whatever. But like, I feel like it's just brands, and that I think in this world you need anticipation that people are going to keep. There's going to be more to that brand coming out soon. I think like the guy who's putting on a masterclass is Frank. Frank, like, it's worth listening. Like, I just listened to Frank with Carly Riley, like that podcast, and he was just saying things. I was like, you just understand what creates value in this space. Like, I shouldn't even say creates value, but like what, like he just creates interest and attention, and ultimately that leads to value, be it short or long term. He's just like, I don't want to do anything that's not going to break the internet. Like, I just want people always to be guessing things that are interesting, get people talking about me, making people feel connected to what this is. Like, and I think sometimes we get too into things that are like bigger picture, higher stories, when in reality that just hasn't been what's been working in this space. What's been working in this space is like the attention economy, people feeling connection with it, people wanting to make it their PFP. How great is it for punks that Jay-Z still has that as his punk? How great was Steph Curry for apes? Like, it's just like this, like, and that's no different from Roger Federer wearing a Rolex. It's like, it's making people feel good about being part of these brands. What's the long play? I think, we'll have to see. Like, but I think when people stop treating these things like brands and start getting too interested in like building other stuff, it can be great for the ecosystem, but it might not be great for your holders. Because what people want is a brand they feel connected to, a brand they feel has more coming, a brand they feel is growing, a brand that they feel like people FOMO about. Like, that's what people want. And when you lose track of that, like, you can do awesome things. You can be the best builder in the world, but it might not lead to good things happening for your NFT price.
Back to you, Node. I want to ask Sam those questions. Thank you, Sam.
For sure. And I think you're like, I've long held that same theory, which is like, look, PFPs to me, it's all about digital identity, like 100%, like it's digital identity and that's it. Like, and so for me, the easiest thing has been, hey, I'm going to get a punk. That was like one of my first buys. And then a grifter was a no-brainer back in January when my good friend of the show, Chris Bennett, told me to get one because I was like, okay, it's an X copy and you can use it as a PFP if you want, and you don't have to worry about whatever happens in the future, because I feel like Xcopy has obviously established himself as in my opinion, like the native, digital artist. So
yeah, I actually met someone I was at a ranch in Arizona. My parents live in Arizona. So I was up there and I just met some random dude who was there with his kid. And like, he was talking about NFTs. He doesn't know NFTs, but he was like, I sense that let's say this just becomes an era that people remember, then Xcopy will be like one of the people that you have to own, and yeah, I thought that was like I don't own any Xcopy, but I thought that was an interesting take. And sorry, I should have sent you guys some more stuff before we did this podcast so we'd have more kind of visual material.
No, not at all. I mean, half the time it's just on us. Half the time we cruise around. Whenever Pio comes on the show, I make him do this. Like, he just defaults to doing the screen sharing because he knows like he's a much better multitasker than I am. So, but yeah, I do have a question, and this one actually it's from a test tube Ted in the comments. This will be a perfect transition. So he wants to know how you view PFPs versus art NFTs differently, and whether there's difference in how you view the quantitative trends.
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, when I joined Proof, I wasn't as the art side. So I've like recently really gotten into the art side, but it's a bit of a newer thing. I was kind of raised in the PFP space. I mean, the biggest thing for me, the difference is on the data. I don't think floor price matters as much on art projects, so it's harder to analyze from like my historic floor bias, just because these are illiquid collections, and they're liquid collections. So floor can really like Ringer's floor can move up and down 7 ETH and there'll be no trades, So that's a little bit of a different way just from like a data analysis. But I think the big difference is that, PFPs just have this natural marketing channel from people owning them. I think you have the same from people owning them and then marketing them as their PFP. It's just like this constant thing where you're constantly seeing what people are, and like the way people tweet has an impact on how you view the project almost. Like whereas the art side doesn't really have that as much. But I do think like what we've seen over the past 2 months is just random art blocks projects just pop off every day. Like every day I have 2 new charts that just look like boom, and like yesterday, it was Contractions by Loie Hollowell went from 5 to 7.5 ETH. Like Fake It Till You Make It by Maya Mann has gone from 0.3 ETH to 2 ETH. Like,
really? That one went from 0.3 to 2. Is that the one that's just the words?
Yep.
Oh, man.
It went from 0.3 like in September to it's now at 2.2. The one that
one was not well favored because it was like, it's literally words on the screen. It's like fake it till you make it, I think. And I remember seeing it and being like, yeah, I clearly don't get it. Like I don't get this one. Do you have any insight as to that one in particular? Because I find that one fascinating.
I think it's become like
there it is right there, PO in the middle.
Yeah, I think what's the floor now?
2.2.
Yeah, I think it's become a bit of a meme within the Art Blocks Discord where people are popping these up a lot, and like it's kind of like a fun meme to own. So I think that's happening. But I think the other thing is I was like tying kind of the PFP to art blocks. I think art blocks are really driven by the right people buying them. I think that's very similar to the art world. It's like when there are a couple wallets where if you see them buying, and you see them tweeting about it, this is no different from PFPs. Like you really start to get a lot of movement there. I was talking to Emily Shee, who of Memories of Chilin in Marfa, and I was like, do you know what's happened that your collection has gone from 4 to 8 ETH over the past couple of weeks? Because she was really popping off. Yeah, and she was like, I'm not even sure. It's a very different frame of analysis than PFPs, where it's like they drop some egg into your wallet that you never heard about. And then, like the types of things that drove PFPs just don't really happen here. So I think there's that. I think there's like a big piece about this is getting to know the artists. Like, are the artists going out and about, like, kind of talking about their work? Do they have plans in the future? Another thing is like, do the artists care about their collectors? When people start saying things like the art is the utility, like, I agree. I totally agree. But I also think as an artist, you want to watch out for your collectors, like watch out for the supply. Try to be going out there talking about your work. Try to like, put work out at the right cadence. It's just like a very different kind of framework than what you see kind of in the PFP space with certainly some overlap.
And on that part about like the artist side, I think that the relevance of this stuff on the art side actually has a lot to do with the relevance of the artist as the traditional art world, deems their relevance. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you want to talk about music NFTs, I think the reason we haven't seen any massive run on a music NFT is because the people that are making music NFTs aren't crossover hits in the actual, music world, right? But like, you look at an artist that blew up like in the past 10 years, Lil Nas X, the guy that made Old Town Road, right? He was really young. He made that song like literally with a beat he got off the internet. It literally became a #1 song. Now he's got like 4 or 5 other #1 songs. So he's a legit artist. If he had put out NFTs before Old Town Road came out, and then he became the massive star that he is, and he said, yeah, like my NFTs, I have to think that there would be value accrual to the original NFTs that he put out, right? But that's because of crossover success into the bigger industry, right? If we see artists, and you're kind of seeing this with Ferocious a little bit, it seems like Thank You X is on his way, and you can name a few other artists. If you start to see the artists have success in the traditional art world, and Christie's auctioning off a physical sculpture by Ferocious for X million dollars, that's what I think, will lead to some value accrual to the digital assets as well. So I think there is a component of the artist has to be legit outside of our little teeny tiny space too.
Yeah, I mean, you want to just feel like this person that you're connecting yourself with is growing, and it's like they're getting a wider audience. You're gonna have more people who think, "Wow, you got that early." Like I think that is a big piece of it. If you pull up on there, Contractions by Loie Hollowell. This is Loie Hollowell is just a huge. Loie Hollowell's had Sotheby's sales go for over $1 million. Like, she is like a very legit real world artist, and she put this work out, and she did none of the tech. She was literally just like the artist who came up with the idea, and but the generative aspect was done by someone else. But what's the collection size? I think it's like 220, something like that. So this thing minted out at 0.8. You had only
280.
You had only 280 of them, and you have an artist who is selling on Sotheby's for 1.2 million. So what's the floor at now?
Is that 10 ETH? So
10 ETH. Jeez.
It was at 5.5 yesterday.
Oh shit! So 279 times 10 ETH, 2790 ETH. What's the ETH cost? $1,200?
Yeah,
11, something like that. That's like a $3.5 million market cap right now.
For the whole collection. Yeah. But these floors are so thin, and yeah, so this was, and it went for 0.8, it jumped up to like 5 the first day, then kind of settled down. But with these types of things, if a couple people like, what, I want to own one of those, suddenly the floor's gone from 5 to 10 because these things are so thin. And obviously I don't own one. Obviously I haven't bought one, but I think this is like an interesting example of the opposite of what you're saying, where someone from real world came in. But if they think like, can we get those real world people in here? Can this become, or even if you don't, can this become a big enough thing within the art collecting community on Twitter who's never even heard of Loie Hollowell, which is me before a month ago? You can get some serious movement in some of these things.
Yeah, that was the same with me. Like these look, I mean, I don't have any necessarily good opinion on the actual art here, because I was like, it is what it is. And so it broke my rule of being like, I have to really like it to buy it. That's like my baseline for buying anything on Art Blocks is if I at least need to love it, and then I'll buy it. And it's funny that you brought up Emily Shia, because she's my favorite artist, and we literally she finds her way into conversation in about every episode of our show. So it makes me smile that you did it for me this time. I've got 2 of those still. What are your thoughts on, we've got, this is a cool one, but there's Fontana. Like, tell me about the run up there. I'm mad because I missed it. I thought the art was cool. I did not know that it was going to get to like Meridian level
Wow. I
floor.
remember when this dropped, Node. Holy
Yeah,
shit.
we were talking about it at like,
Oh,
2, 3
man.
ETH, and I'm like, this already ran up pretty high. Like, you have any insights into what happened and why this ripped?
I think you have a couple things. One is that, I think it's a rich algorithm. There's a lot going on here, just with the colors, with the shapes. Like, so I think there's it's like, I think it's fun with art blocks where they're accessible, but as you get to know them, there's more there. Two, my sense is that Harvey is just really social. He like creates work in public. I don't know him, but this is just my sense from kind of just from like following social media and whatnot. And I also think he has another project coming out in the first quarter, which is kind of interesting. Like, I mean, on the one hand, you don't want too much supply of something, but on the other hand, if someone has something else coming out that creates more buzz around the artist, as I said, the status quo for NFTs is to just kind of trickle lower in price as attention goes to other things. But if this is a guy who's out there, who's got something coming up in the first quarter, maybe there's some catalyst on the horizon. But this is all me, just as someone who's kind of riffing. I don't own one myself. This was just popping up on my screens every single day, so I started like sending Telegram messages to my friends who understand art blocks, being like, what's going on with this thing? And, he went from 3 ETH to like Meridian's level floor price in a week. And I just think that's also the market we're in right now. Like we just go from narrative to narrative. It used to be like you had to talk about utility. Like if you didn't talk about utility a year ago, then why are you even here? And now utility is a 4-letter word. And if you're not talking about art blocks and being in it for the art and loving the art, then you look weird, or you're not getting the RTs. So like I don't know, man. It feels like we're also in this environment where like the 8 flippers I know are lingering on art blocks channels trying to figure out what gets hot, and this is like the thing to flip if you're in that space as well. So I think narratives just have a bit more fuel to the fire when things pop off right now.
Interesting. Yeah, I would agree. It does seem like there's more and more momentum on the art side. Maybe it's my bias because I've been focused on it for a little while now. But it's interesting because of the smaller sizes, and I do think that art blocks is trending smaller. I don't even think it's like a known fact, right? Like their collection sizes are smaller, and I wonder if they're encouraging the artists or if the artists have just figured it out. Like, don't drop 1,000-piece collection right away. Like 200 or 100 or 300 or 500 is a great number, to get going. And that is what's, I think Fontana is like 500, right? And that's kind of what helps some of these to have an even more like reflexive floor price movement, if I would guess.
Yeah, I mean, the worst thing for anybody, and it's always a possibility, is that it doesn't even mint up. And I think like they're like smaller collection sizes help. I mean, I don't think that really happens with the curated projects, but even just the Art Blocks Presents project that minted yesterday went from 0.6 to 1.1 ETH. I mean,
yeah, the metaphysics. I actually, if we looked, I mean, you'd be able to tell me, Mr. Data Guy. But like when I feel like every single Art Blocks mint that has happened over the last 2 months, if you minted at the bottom of the Dutch auction, you would have made money.
Profitable trade.
You would have profitable trade.
Yeah, it's not across the board. The one
Okay,
on Monday,
there's
actually,
an exception.
There are a bunch. I mean, the one on Monday did go down, but these things are so like at this point, you really can't mint the bottom of the auction if you don't have a bot. Like the Art Blocks process is just totally bot run, where, I mean, clearly the bots are doing, they know that that's probably a winning trade. And like net on the whole, you've just made, I mean, you got into contractions at 0.8 ETH a month ago. You got into Fontana. Fontana was, wasn't that long ago. You got into these projects at like very reasonable prices, and that overcame like the one on Monday. I can't remember what it was called, but I think it went from like minting at 0.35 to 0.2 floor, something like that. There are a couple of the presents projects that haven't like popped off, but like the risk reward has been extremely favorable.
Yeah. Interesting. So we got another question. Witters, she's an awesome artist. She drew NFT Nick's like ape portrait that's sitting behind him every time, if you've ever seen it. But she wants to know, would y'all rather an artist put out a full collection or drop 101s consistently? What do you think?
I think the best combination, I'm just riffing here, and I could change my thoughts, but I think the best combination is that you have a collection so that you have people who love your work, and I think there's something about the social aspect of collecting. The guy who did this so well was Drifter Shoots. I mean, he made 150, but he got like all the top collectors, or a lot of top collectors started buying them. So then you're looking at Seed Phrase, you're looking at all these, who knows who, and they all got pictures of Drifter Shoots on their feed, and And then people, want his work because he's got this aspirational project out there. He's got people talking about it, doing your marketing for you. I think with just being a one-of-one artist, and when I pull up the super rare sales for some days, I haven't heard of a lot of the people. I think that the collections can be really good for building out an audience, getting your marketing channel, getting that natural kind of like marketing flywheel spinning for you, and then use that as a jumping off place to go out and do the one-on-one. So I think that's been generally a pretty good strategy. I think I'm not a huge fan of open editions. I think it gets tempting when you start realizing you can print money as an artist if you're on fire to start doing things like open editions, or to start cranking out more collections more and more. I think you want to be careful. I did a proof podcast with Grant Yoon and spent a lot of time talking about just like the business of NFTs and like, how do you think about supply, and like, how do you watch out for collectors? And I think there is a science and an art there. But broadly speaking, I think having a collection. The other thing Grant told me, which I think would be good advice for any artist out there, is he says that if anyone bids for a piece on super rare of his and doesn't win, that he DMs that person. That person basically just like hit on you, right? They said, I like your work. I want, and then you turn them away, right? They didn't have enough money for you. So he knows that's a potential buyer. He said, and who knows if it's true, he said 75% of his sales, 75% have come from people who he reached out to proactively before they bought anything. And I thought that was just such good advice. It's like, how do you reach out, build a collector base? And I thought that was separate to that question, but I thought that was a pretty good piece of advice.
Dude, absolutely. I totally agree on open editions, by the way. I did a big thread on it. It was fun to interact. And congrats on getting Grant Yoon. He told me no. Actually, he just said, I'm busy right now, maybe next year in January. And then like 3 weeks later, dude, he's on with you, dude. Of course, we're not proof yet, but we'll get there. Our viewership is actually close though. So,
nice.
We're going head to head with you, dude. Be careful.
Let's go, man. You know what? We all win. I got lucky because, Kevin has just built out such a massive platform, and he's just been super generous about letting me try to host podcasts and meet cool creators and stuff, but we get his whole distribution. So I can't say that, respect for you for building this from the ground up. I kind of jumped in the sixth inning. Yeah,
no, I actually did the same thing. I just leverage off of Pio and Nick and their following. So it's great. It works well. Yeah, I mean, speaking of which, like, I love that you talked a little bit about the supply dynamics of artists. Somebody on Twitter asked, I think it was me and Chris Bennett in a thread, like, hey, what would you recommend getting, a Spicy Gourmet X copy or a Grifter? And I think prices are probably similar. But Spicy Gourmet is like very small. There's like 24 of them or something. And Grifters are 666. And I said, well, my feelings are like Spicy Gourmet, it's very rare, but the Grifters, because it's a bigger collection, like you almost have more of this community and more awareness because of that. And it's not too many, and it's still X copy. So I feel like Grifters are actually like a really solid play because they have a little bit of that community and there's not too many. But like, yeah, what are your thoughts there? Like, if you had to pick up an X copy, where would you go? Which one would you go after? One of the Afterburns, Guzzlers, or would you go to Grifters, Max Payne?
I'm embarrassed to say this. I don't know enough about X copy to give any answer that's not just like taking what you said and trying to spit it out in a different way. So I'm going to pass on that question. Just I'm not super deep in the X copy game. I think it's a super interesting question though. Like, and it gets to what we were talking about earlier. Like, you want other people who are promoting the work that you own to build that FOMO, to build that energy, and so it is interesting that these two collections of totally different sizes have similar floor prices, but
yeah. No worries. Okay, so we've been rolling. Our time is about up, but I wanna ask you the final question that a lot of people I ask basically every guest, which is, let's pretend you're talking to your buddy that's entering the space. What is your advice to him on what they should do? Like, what's your advice to them on saying, hey, I'm about to start buying NFTs, or even anybody out there like me and saying, okay, here we are in the bear market. What should I be doing for the next 6 to 12 months to find success?
I mean, I think for that new person, I mean, there's slightly different questions, right? But I think for that new person, I think you want to, I think you want to start buying stuff pretty quick, and cheap stuff that doesn't hurt you, to lose. But
just start lighting money on fire.
Just blow that up.
The only way to do it.
And I specifically would tell you to buy the NFTs I'm selling. I'm just no, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is like, find something cheap that you start to like just learn about a collection and like the example I give, like I bought a squiggle recently. I had my first squiggle. It's behind me. I knew I'd been doing research on like squiggles numbers for months. It wasn't until I bought one that I actually like really understood what a buyer thinks about. Like, what are the different traits? Like, how you can research stuff as much as you want, but until you actually start to like get that feeling of buying something, I think it's really hard to like deeply understand the space and the mindset. So again, I would say do this at the cheapest price point you can. Like, don't go buy a squiggle. But I think figure something out, spend a week researching, trying to figure out what might be interesting, and then get a little skin in the game so you can you'll just start following it in a way that I think people who are and I see this all the time in data research. Like, I can tell when I read research reports if this person buys NFTs. And like, so much of my advantage wasn't that I'm like a better data scientist than a lot of these people out there. It was that I was combining that with the narrative of somebody who was flipping stuff and who was trading and who was like thinking like, why are red lasers trading lower than blue beams? Like, is this a regular thing? And I only noticed that because I almost bought one, so I think like having that just helps you have a little bit, especially if you want to like build a Twitter and kind of get in the flow that way. I mean, the stuff, I like squiggles long term. I like punks long term. I think Azukis have a good year ahead. I just think like they're moving past the FUD and there are communities out there that are rallying behind them. So that's interesting to me. I love Frank. I just think he's doing interesting stuff. Love him or hate him, we're talking about him. And that's so much better than kind of just being on the sidelines and not interesting. He's just got that young energy. And he's also, I think, got really good takes. Like, when you hear this guy talk about NFTs with people, I'm like, damn, dude, you just like, that's like some serious social science insight you have into this weird puzzle. So I'd like look at that ecosystem a little bit. Those are some of the things that I'd be looking at. I like the stuff we're doing at Proof. I'm proud of this team. I like being part of that team. So I do like the Proof stuff, but again, I try not to pump those bags.
Most of us are too poor to buy a Proof Pass, so you don't worry, you won't be.
I kind of like oddities. I like oddities a little bit, but yeah. But no, I mean, those are all. It's always tough to say, but I think like paying attention to new mints, like it's been a pretty EV positive trade, like you said, to buy new art blocks. Like find a new project that's minting. You can get a lot of these like art blocks present stuff for 0.2, 0.3 ETH, which still you're still paying a few $100s for a JPEG. Like, it's not nothing. But I think like that's also like an interesting, like, start to get some skin. I started paying attention to art blocks a lot closer when I started buying a couple. So it's also an interest. I should be buying more just to get smarter about it, but
absolutely. I don't know. Well, yeah, keep watching the show, dude, and we'll get you buying more art blocks, man.
That's another thing we're talking, where NFT God would give the exact opposite thing. Like, NFT God, one of his big sound bites is like, don't put your money on fire. Like, never buy anything. Just analyze. And like, I had Cyrus on the show. Cyrus is just like one of the most badass fucking traders there is. And he studied mutants for a month before he bought his first one, and then he had 175 trades where he only lost money on 3. So a lot of this game also is understanding your personality type, right? Like, I personally just can't get much information without getting some skin in the game. Other people are like more disciplined than I am. So know how you learn.
Love it. Well, dude, thank you so much for joining the show. Another week in Node Mode in the books. Go ahead and follow Sam. I'm sure you're already following him on Twitter at punk9059. Really great to have you, man. Let's chat again soon. This has been super valuable, and we'll peace out. Catch you guys next week.
Stay in touch, guys. That was fun.